Thank you very much for being here, for assisting this event. For Instituto Cervantes, it's an honor to host the launching of the new Urgent Stylebook, libro de estilo urgente, by the EFE agency, la agencia EFE, which is co-edited with Instituto Cervantes. Linking this presentation with the International Women's Day, we are presenting a round table which focuses on women and media. And we are having, for this occasion, Indira Guerrero, who will be the moderator. She is journalist and head of EFE News Agency in New Delhi. Julie Thekudan, activist and expert from Equality Now for South Asia. T.K. Radhalakshmi, Mr. Ashutosh, founding editor of Satya Hindi, and Javier Lascurain, a journalist and executive coordinator of the book, who will connect in virtual mode. I hope he is listening to us and he is with us. And I want to thank Miguel Ángel Oliver, who is the president of EFE agency, Agencia EFE, who will be deliver the closing remarks. And actually, I want to announce that there is a change in the program because our head of communication in Madrid, in Instituto Cervantes, she faced some troubles in the visa issue, and she's not able to be with us. But I am sure this will be a very interesting topic. And thank you very much, all of you, for being here. And thank you very much for Isabel and her team and all Instituto Cervantes team to make this possible. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. I am the India and South Asia Bureau Chief for the Spanish news agency, EFE. And my name is Indira Guerrero. And I promise you, there is a story behind it. Indira is an Indian name, yet my parents are... Indira is an Indian name, yet my parents are working class people from rural Venezuela. The year Indira Gandhi was assassinated, my mother was pregnant. This was the pre-internet era. They only saw headlines. Indira Gandhi, the first woman Prime Minister of India, the Iron Lady. They knew very little of her politics, but they knew they wanted that strength for their child. For several years of my life, I tried to live up to that expectation, at least until I found my own identity. It is my name and also my byline, so it defines me. And this is my story of how media can shape the story of a woman. So I ask you, how do you feel media is exercising this power in relation to women in India? Are we being conscious of the role in perpetuating or challenging stereotypes? And it is about that power, the power to shape narrative, to recreate realities. What brings us here today to present EFE's new Urgent Stylebook. Because the representation of women is not a secondary issue. It is the pulse of our society. the style book isn't just a book. It is a tool to wield that power with responsibility and precision. It is a compass to navigate the complexities of representation, especially when it comes to women. So we are here today to offer you a privileged look into the heart of our newsroom, to recreate the discussions that shape the news about women. With experience of a female editor, the experience of a male editor, and a tireless advocate for women's rights, we will unravel the dynamic that shapes the news. So let's begin. I would like to introduce again Julie Telucan from Equality Now for South Asia, TK Rajalashmi, Chief Editor for Frontline Magazine, and of course Ashutosh, Founding Editor for Satya Hindi, and our colleague Javier Lascurain, who is the Executive Coordinator of the book. This is in Indian media, a woman is a story when she is the victim. Otherwise, she is invisible, and that's what we wanted to talk about. Can we all agree that all the major woman-centric stories in the last decade or so have been related to women being the victim, such as Nirbhaya, Hathras, Triple Talaq, or the Kolkata medical rape? So, Lashmi, let me ask you, who do you think is driving those stereotypes? Driving those stereotypes in media? Yeah. Yeah.
Hello.
Okay, so I think I'm audible. Okay. Gracias, first of all, for having me on this panel. Mucho gracias, rather. Okay, but it's a very serious topic today that we're discussing about who sort of perpetuates these stereotypes, as you sort of rightly placed it. It's not certainly the reporters. It's not the persons on the field, but the owners who perpetuate such stereotypes, because the policies, or rather the lack of policies, that dictate the choice of stories, that dictate the content of stories, the approach to reporting. So all these things are part of the problem in a sense. So I do not think actually there are that a certain policy exists within newsrooms and within media organizations. For instance, a conscious policy, right? That is there in black and white. It's not there. Things that are acceptable and things that are not acceptable. It's for instance, there is no playbook exactly. There is no let's say dossier on which to rely on. Okay, there aren't a set of do's and don'ts. I mean, there is a certain unwritten code that you shouldn't cross while reporting, but it's not really spelled out in that sense. It's not really spelled out that there will be punitive action against you if you cross those limits, right? Now a certain extent wokeism is there, that we're supposed to use certain terms and not use certain terms, but again, it's not a very conscious policy decision. It comes on ground. People just learn while they are reporting, they get sensitized on their own. Okay, let me say that. Okay, they get sensitized on their own, and of course the sub-editors, etc., they do their job of editing out problematic stuff that they feel that might be problematic. But those stereotypes, I think by and large persist in terms of language, in terms of expression, in terms of cutting out what may be important, but and retaining what may be problematic also sometimes.
Okay. Would you like to add something?
First of all, let me apologize for being late here because the Delhi traffic. I was supposed to leave by 4, but then I was late by 5 minutes, so one crossing the Noida was very tough. So let me say sorry for that. See, I think I partly agree with what she has said, but the larger question is that who is pushing these narratives? Who's pushing these narratives? I think this narrative is pushed by the male-dominated society, the patriarchal society. That sometimes when we have a conversation, then we realize that we are not talking about the women, we are not talking about only males, we are talking about only men, as if the women are not around. Though these boundaries are pushed, it has been very difficult to pass any kind of any kind of statement which is anti-woman. But subconsciously, when we talk about, like we talk about common man, what is common man? Is there no common woman? There is a common woman. So, but it comes very naturally, and especially in a country like India, because we are still, I must say this, it's a semi-feudal society in that sense. The newsrooms are normally dominated by women, and in fact, very recently, one woman has become the editor of a daily newspaper, and that was celebrated, after 144 years, so Jyoti Malhotra. And just imagine how the male-dominated the entire newsroom is. There's also a classification, a categorization has also to be made in the sense because newsroom, the English newsroom is still not good here. Health is still not more cosmopolitan, less of stereotyping over there. But if you go to the languages, like Hindi, I come from the Hindi background, there is still very strong feudal mindset is there. And it's very difficult for the male to accept the women very well. It's not that their intent, they have some bias in it. They're not a overt bias. But somewhere down the line, it's difficult for them to accept a female boss, a female boss, or to accept somebody who's doing very well in the newsroom. So in the vernacular, in the language press, that problem is still there. But lot more clear is the English language media and the lot of English.
Well, still, when we are in the newsroom and a crime happens to a woman, we still know that we have to write about it. What happened in the newsroom that we don't see any other news? What happened to us? Because even for women, we were talking the other day in the office how we, like our mindset works, and when we see the crime report of India, we go to see the data and rape. We don't see any other. And I am a woman too, so it's how our mind works, that this is what we want.
Yeah, please. Okay, okay. First of all, I'd like to say that there's nothing called, a mindset, because nothing called a static fixed mindset. Okay, it can be changed. It can be subject to change, providing an alternative language or an alternative thought process is also part of that ecosystem, right? So that alternative thought process is not offered essentially, and in fact, violence sells. Violence is voyeuristic, so it sells, and crime sells. You find leading, in fact, a leading newspaper in the country today. The front page is full of murder and crime stories. I mean, normally, one would not, in fact, expect a leading paper to do that, but it sells. It immediately grabs eyeballs because it creates anxiety among people, and that anxiety feeds on further anxiety because they're keen to know what happened. Then you have inside pages. You have look at page 3. After page 1, it says, go to page 3 for more news and more sordid details. So the more sordid the story is, the more eyeballs it attracts, and there your city pages garner, the maximum of revenue. So it's also linked into the market. As Ashutosh rightly said, that patriarchy is of course, it does operate at that level, but I think it's a market. The market that also sort of dictates, what sells essentially. So then I think the voices of the working class do not sell. They aren't any buyers for the voices of the working class. So you have the middle class, the aspirational classes who have the purchasing power because they're the consumers. So their voices sell. So what sells is what you see every day, essentially.
Now, Julie, there is a reason why I was so interested of what you have to say here is because I think you can get us a perspective of how this narrative changed the life of a woman, how we, cases, as most of the cases on rape and media go all out covering the other story with every single detail, and how can, what do we do for the victim when we do that?
Okay, thank you so much for having me on this panel to talk about this issue. I did want to add a little bit to what Rajlakshmi said here, that the market, who is perceived to be the market is, when we were trying to do a media campaign many years back, we were told the typical reader is a male, 30, in his 30s, and in a city like Bangalore. So if that's your readership, that's your market. And women are, it is perceived to be more interested in wellness and beauty, and so it goes back to what Ashutosh was saying. It's more of a patriarchal mindset and viewing of who is the reader and what is the reader interested in. Coming back to your question about how it has changed, I'm not too sure whether it has changed. I mean, there would be some changes. If I go back to the way reportage was there after Nirbhaya incident in 2012, there were a lot more nuances, but evidence has shown that Nirbhaya now has become the benchmark. And so you have to kind of, all other reported cases are kind of not judged, but kind of, meets that. And that narrative that you need to be brutally assaulted, physical violence needs to be there. It kind of builds that kind of hierarchy in a way, that what gets coverage, what doesn't. So what Raj Lakshmi was saying about, if you're famous, you get coverage. If it is really a serious, grave situation, you get coverage. But what doesn't get coverage is if you are from the rural belt, if you are from the marginalized communities like Dalits, indigenous women. So at the same time when Nirbhaya the case was being talked about in the media, there were about, if I'm not mistaken, 19 cases against Dalit women in Haryana, which is just across the border in some ways. But nobody was talking about it. One of the reasons could be that it seemed very distant for a lot of the readers. That's also because the readership is not, in a way, educated, if that's the word that I could use, about the different, the social fabric that makes India, caste, religion. I'm not saying that they're not aware, but how does it play in all of these instances, like there have been cases of the Hathras case. Yeah, that was a Dalit woman. And so how does that bring the reader close to the issue, bring the reader to react to the issue? I don't think that has changed quite a lot. Yes, you do have episodes where the readers have, or the audience or citizens have come onto the road, but let's also try and analyze what kind of situations. They're more urban situations. You're not out there on the streets for rural women facing violence on a regular basis. So in that sense, it also then leads to that whole, like what Raj Lakshmi was saying, you tend to talk about the details of the episode. What was the woman doing? So in a way, victim blaming and not really putting the onus on the perpetrator. To say why should the perpetrator be, or alleged perpetrator be doing what he has done? So there is, in that sense, sexualization of events, of violence against women. And in a way that kind of adds to the culture that, yeah, it's okay, you get away with it. There is impunity, so it's all right in a way, and you're not changing the narratives around the culture of violence. I'll stop there.
Okay, so The opinion is, or your perspective is that Nirbhaya case was a benchmark. So for media to have an effect like Nirbhaya case 20 years ago, sorry, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, it has to be even. What does it exactly? What does it have to happen for another benchmark for us to go further, right? I don't know if if you're gonna add something. Yeah.
Well, as I said, the violence is something that always grabs, eyeballs, right? And it happened in a city, the capital. So it attracted a lot of, in fact, disproportionate attention. Of course, it was, I think, it was important enough because the brutality of the crime was such that it really shocked everybody, it numbed everybody. But there was also a certain, political angle to the whole thing. There was a chief minister at that point who was not very popular, and maybe there was some element behind that agitation that everybody came out of the streets because I think that kind of mobilization has not been seen, as Julie sort of pointed out, because there have been even after Nirbhaya, there have been a series of very, very brutal gang rapes that have taken place in and around Delhi, not only in Delhi but outside Delhi also, in other parts of the country. There was this anyway. But anyway, the point is not to go into that or to sort of trivialize the incidents. I think themselves. I think yes, it should be covered. Yes, but at the same time, I also feel that that by just focusing on violence against women, which has of course gone up in every form, the media does not do justice when it comes to portraying the struggles of ordinary women in this country. When we have very ordinary women who are in the let's say in the ICDS services, or who are midday meal workers. These are all schemes of the central government, and they are ill paid. They are overworked. They are given all kinds of government responsibility to perform. And in spite of that, they have organized themselves, into unions, and they come to the capital in huge numbers, and the media completely blacks them out. So it's peculiar. So here, I would say that that the media is essentially a social class. It represents certain class interests, certain social class interests. And here, it is not so much the interests of the working class that's interested in, because why would they ignore it? It's it's peculiar, but they pick violence, and that too very selectively, violence. We've had a very regressive civil code which has been just passed by a state government in a country, which says that live-in relationships have to be registered. Now I think barring just one or two, here was an occasion for a huge protest by several young people in this country who were agitated when Nirbhaya happened, that who are in consensual relationships, why should their relationships be registered by the government or the state? So this was absolutely intrusive. This was violating norms of basic privacy. But in spite of that, the kind of agitation that one should have expected, did not happen. We had, of course, some editorials commenting on it. I think television was completely absent, but I'm sure Ashutosh's channel would have definitely picked it up and critiqued it also, because because there are, of course, such outlets which do critique such policies, such regressive policies. Yeah.
See, what I want to add to, because if in Indian context we try to understand, India is basically, culturally, if you go by, then it's not an equal society. Civilizationally, we had always been a very unequal society. So invisibilization of women is not just only a one facet of the society. There are the Dalits, they are totally invisible in the society. In the newsroom, there's hardly any Dalit you will find. The OBCs are hardly, even the minorities. So this has to be seen in the larger context. And it is so surprising, it is so paradoxical in the sense, because as you mentioned about Mrs. Indira Gandhi, in a poor country like India, Mrs. Indira Gandhi was worshipped like anything, and all the males, in fact it was said that she's the only male in the cabinet. And it's not only the typical phenomenon of India. You go to entire South Asia, Sima Bhandarnaike, another woman. Kumaratunga, she was another woman. Then Benazir Bhutto in Pakistan, again a very different society altogether. You go to Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina. So in a country, in a South Asia, where the women are not treated equally, and they're most of the time the most invisible in the professional world, but they are accepted as the leaders. Where if you compare that with the American society, in the last so many years, more than 200 years, there's hardly any woman who come up to become the head of the state or the head of the government. Two women tried and both of them failed miserably. And who won? Mr. Donald Trump. Mr. Donald Trump was fighting election against Mr. Biden. He lost. But when he was fighting with Hillary Clinton, he won. When he was fighting with this woman, he lost. So there's something extremely paradoxical here. So maybe you can reflect on this in a much better way, because why such a male-dominated society, a feudal and a semi-feudal society, where the literacy is not so high, still not so modern, accept women as a prime minister, accept women as the head of the state, but they are not willing to accept women as the bureau chief or as an editor, and they find it very difficult to become an editor. Like I just quoted, one woman in the last 144 years managed to become the editor of a newspaper, but Mrs. Gandhi can be the prime minister, and even in fact Mrs. Indira Gandhi, her aunt Lakshmi, what is her name, who became the ambassador to the US, Jawaharlal Nehru's wife, Vijay Lakshmi Pandit. So in fact it struck me because I was a months back, I met a woman and she was introduced as a first career diplomat woman to become the ambassador in US. So Vijay Lakshmi Pandit can be, just because of her association with Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru or belonging to the family, but for a career woman diplomat to reach to that position in the last 70 years, just one woman. So I think there's something very paradoxical here, and I think that needs to be understood, how contradictory is the world we are living in.
Okay. Now that we're talking about this, I don't know if Javier is with us.
Hola.
Hola, Javier.
Bien. Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes. Javier, estamos aquí con los panelistas y no sé si has seguido la intervención, pero justamente hablábamos de cómo la representación de mujeres en los medios está siempre relacionada a la mujer como víctima. Y una de las cosas en las que el manual de estilo viene a resolver o viene a hacer como un texto fundacional para nosotros es resolver estas dudas y señalarnos lo que parece obvio. Entonces, no sé si puedes comentar con nosotros cómo el libro de estilo hace un aporte en lo que es la representación, el uso de las fuentes, de las mujeres como fuente, y sí, en general, la imagen de la mujer en los medios.
Sí, buenas tardes. Espero que me estén bien. Desde aquí tengo alguna pequeña dificultad para escucharles, pero creo que si me oyen bien, quería contarles en un par de rasgos en qué consiste nuestro libro de estilo. El libro de estilo de la agencia EFE, ¿hay alguna dificultad? ¿Sí? Bien. Sí, bueno, en ese caso, el libro de estilo, mira, si te parece, no sé si se escuchando sí. O prefieres que pare un poquito.
No, te escucho.
Perfecto. Les decía, el libro de estilo es, de algún modo, la obra que recoge las obligaciones de los periodistas que trabajan para la agencia EFE, que es una agencia pública y, por tanto, propiedad de toda la sociedad en su conjunto. Sus obligaciones desde el punto de vista ético, también desde el punto de vista profesional y también desde el punto de vista lingüístico. Y, en general, general, los libros, siempre creo que los libros de estilo de EFE, el que hemos editado hace unos meses con apoyo del Instituto Cervantes, es el último de una larga tradición de libros de estilo, son algo más que las normas que rigen el trabajo interno de la agencia EFE, porque por la posición que ocupa EFE en el mundo de la comunicación en español, sus libros de estilo tienen también mucha influencia en otros medios. De algún modo, nos gusta creer que el libro de estilo de EFE es a veces el libro de estilo de...
Javier, ¿nos escuchas? Sí. Let's continue. And Javier was saying something that you also mentioned at the beginning. Is the fact that for some media, they don't have a stylebook. A book that says, stop here, don't go there. And the India law said that we can't name the victim.
Con los temas de los que se está hablando en esta vez. En dos de los casos, lo que hace el libro es recoger documentos anteriores de la agencia EFE. Uno de ellos es un manual de comunicación no sexista en el que se habla de algunas cuestiones de las que les he oído hablar hace algunos minutos, ¿no? Ese manual de comunicación no sexista se aprobó en la agencia EFE en el año 2019 y queda recogido en este libro. Y dice algunas cosas que creo que deben regir el modo en el que enfocamos las noticias desde el punto de vista del género, ¿no? Diversifiquemos las fuentes. Nuestras fuentes no pueden ser siempre hombres. Retratemos la diversidad de funciones y de posiciones en la sociedad entre hombres y mujeres. Los tipos sexistas que a veces se nos cuelan a todos, ¿no? No mostremos a las mujeres siempre como víctimas, porque hay mucho más en eso, ¿no? O, esa es una primera parte sobre el enfoque de género. Hay otra que se refiere específicamente al lenguaje con el que informamos sobre la violencia machista. También es una guía que aprobó EFE en el año 2000.
Isabel, no sé si conviene solo intentar con el audio y quitar el vídeo, si le ayuda. Well, one of the things that Javier...
Uno, que es siempre polémica en el ámbito del español, y es lo que se ha venido a llamar el lenguaje inclusivo. ¿Cómo hacemos para que las mujeres se sientan... Sí, sí, sí. Bien, a ver ahora. Quizá ahora mejor, vale, de acuerdo. Decía hay una tercera y última parte que tiene que ver con el lenguaje, lo que se ha venido a llamar lenguaje inclusivo y que siempre ha sido muy polémico en el ámbito del español. Y es la petición de muchas mujeres que dicen que no se sienten representadas a veces en el uso más normativo del lenguaje. En ese sentido, la agencia, como en todos los asuntos de lenguaje, sigue la norma que marca la Real Academia, que dice, por ejemplo, que en el español el masculino puede actuar como un genérico que representa tanto a hombres como mujeres. Pero el hecho de que esto pueda ser así y sea correcto que lo sea, no implica que lo hagamos permanentemente. Y en ese sentido el libro da algunas pautas, algunas claves para avanzar en un uso más del lenguaje mucho más consciente de la presencia y del papel de la mujer, evitando el masculino genérico constante que no siempre es necesario. Creo que esos son los tres grandes ejes que pueden estar relacionados con algunas de las cosas que se están hablando hoy en el Cervantes en Nueva Delhi.
Muchísimas gracias, Javier. No sé si quieren añadir algo. No sé si quieren añadir algo más a la idea. I'm sorry. I always do this. I always do it like I feel like I'm speaking in English, but I'm not. And I realize because I'm speaking like I'm feeling really confident, and then okay, that's why. Well, no, about the relevance of the style book in our newsroom. Yeah, I think for us it's our foundational book. I know the EFE style book since I was in college because for the Spanish-speaking journalists, the EFE agency is who tell us how to do, at least when it comes to representation or like how to do journalism. So even before I dared to dream to join EFE years ago, the style book was relevant. Now, what do you feel like a style book represent for media like right now? Because the communication is also changing.
No, I do agree with you. There should be a style book. I mean, definitely. And you did mention about the fact that that the name of a rape survivor should not be mentioned, right? So I think it came through court order, if I'm not mistaken, because it was not a suo moto.
It's an offense. It's a legal offense.
Exactly, it's a legal offense. So it wasn't something that media organizations, themselves realized that they shouldn't do, but it came through the legal route, essentially.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
The other day, because the law say we shouldn't name the victim, and the other day I saw an article, it wasn't ours, but another media that they decided to name the victim, and they put like in the text, the victim say they agree to share the name, which just means like we even go there to push the victim from a position of power. Would you like to share your name? And she doesn't even know what it means to her, on how is it going to change her life.
Yeah, but I think in the case of the state called Gujarat, where there were really sort of mass rapes, etc. in 2002, they're the victims. They did go to court. They approached the courts. So once they approached the courts, their names were part of the petition, etc. So then it became okay to quote them. And they were also yes, the consent was taken, and they came in front of the media and they spoke about all the things that had happened. This is Bilkis Bano, etc. So it did happen. So, but in the case of minors, minor rape survivors, etc., all those things are not mentioned.
But and this is a real question. I also wonder, Julie, is it the consent enough to share the life of?
I mean, if it's a law, then if it's the law, just the consent is not enough. I think you can. So the law has said that you can, a special court or a special magistrate can, I'm messing up a bit. The parents cannot say that yes, go ahead and publish the name. It has to be a special magistrate who takes that decision. So even the victim or the survivor will have to go and tell the special magistrate that I am ready to give my name. Only then can it be, because there can be other issues related to it if the parents consent to say that yes, you can take our names. Yeah?
But I think in case of adults, even the parents' consent is not needed. In fact, in the Nirbhaya case, it's so different because nobody knows the exact name of the woman. In fact, it is not the name of the woman, but identity of the woman should not be disclosed. But the identity of the woman in case of Nirbhaya was disclosed because her mother and the parents became the television channels. In fact, they moved from one TV channel to another TV channels. So in that case, the identity of the Nirbhaya is disclosed in the public domain, but nobody exactly knows what her name is still. But
yeah,
the identity was disclosed in that sense. So it's a different case altogether. But in case of minors, I think it's total no. If somebody does it, even by accident, he has to face the court and he can go to the court, go to the jail.
Yeah, when I was asking if the consent is enough, and I wanted to hear from you, is does the victim know what is coming after that? That the media is going to be in the house 24 hours?
No, I don't
That's
think...
what I mean, like, is the consent enough, even if she is fully aware, like, yes, share my name,
Yeah, I don't think that kind of support is provided by the media houses or the reporters. Even I would say even NGOs are not equipped to kind of be with that person 24/7 and to protect or to support or to provide uh, which recourse they should take up. So I think the survivor or the victim is definitely not in a position to understand the larger issues. I don't think even the parents are in a position to understand, or the immediate family members are in a position to understand. So I think it's, yeah, I mean, what I wanted to say is that it has to be a change, societal change for that situation to come up where just the victim says, yes, my consent, I give my consent. You have to go to that level to be able to say that that is enough. I don't think we are anywhere close to it.
Yeah, definitely. Would you like to add something to that?
I think she's right in that sense, because even sometimes the consent, whether somebody is giving the consent, doesn't mean that she understands the consequences.
Yeah.
The consciousness of the issue and knowingness of the issue, these are two different things. So a woman might say that I'm adult enough and I'm willing to give my consent, but does she realize that consequences she might face in a society like ours, where she might have to face the stigma throughout her life, and whether she would be able to live that kind of with that kind of stigma. So again, it's a very, very gray area. It might not be legal offense if somebody gives a consent and she says, I'm willing to disclose my identity, and if the reporter does it. So whether the reporter will face the legal consequences, I don't think so. But then the woman has might face the stigma, and she might not be in position to stand to that kind of issue which comes in the future.
I think some time ago we were working in a story in UP. There was a rape victim, and I think it was like years after the crime happened. And then when we went to the area where the victim and the rapist used to live, there was security in the house of the victim protecting her. Nobody in the house of the raper. So she was, I mean, re-victimized every year on the anniversary by media, by security, and she was actually in jail. I mean, she was in her own house. Yes.
Okay, so in the case of the Hathras, incident, the woman and her family, they were Dalits, they were,
Yeah.
and they were a very few, in number in that village also, and the rest of the families were that, dominant castes. So there was always this apprehension that something might be, some harm might come to her other siblings who were also in the village.
Okay.
Her father was also in the village, right? And I think those were the considerations. She died in any case. She passed away. The Hathras victim passed on, right? So, but I think the security was given because there were threats made to the family of to her family by the family of the perpetrators.
But I think there was another angle to the story. It's not only because they were getting threats from the upper caste. There was also an apprehension, and a few media houses reported also that the police were putting pressure on the family to change their statements so that they should. So it's basically a case of where you're destroying the evidences and asking them to basically manipulating their statements on that. So that was also one of the reasons, because that video has come out where the magistrate was saying, okay, these media people will go away after some time, but you have to live here. So in a way, he was threatening them that whatever you're saying in front of the cameras in the media, you have to face the consequences, because they will not come later to your rescue, but you have to live here. So in a way, he was telling them that you have to live with us. So whatever you are saying, you have to be careful enough. So one of the angle was that enough, but I think another angle was that they were threatened, they were intimidated to change their statements so that the perpetrators should not face the consequences.
So I think my point was how media still go after the victim every single year. I think that was my point, and why, like,
It's very selective in the right. It's very selective. There was also this case, of course, Hathras, got a lot of in fact, prominence, because every political party did sort of take it up, which is good, which was a good thing, I thought. But again, this case, now this other case, where politician was involved. The girl was killed. I mean, she was raped and killed, and then her brother was killed. There were so many people in her family who were targeted by the influential politician. So she wasn't provided any security till very late. So I think a lot of factors go into this. So it's very selective. So where a protection is given, I think we would welcome it. We wouldn't see it as at least from the women's movement point of view or from women's organizations, they would sort of welcome it. Even though that stigma, yes, you would say because they're staying in the village and they get identified, because of this constant protection. But it's already known. These things do not get sort of hidden, in a rural context. Everybody knows what's happening.
Yeah.
So,
Just to add that if there is a revisiting of that case every year, in order to track where it has reached, in order to kind of highlight what the gaps are, what the challenges are, why is it not moving, what is the responsibility of the different stakeholders, in a way that might be good. In the sense that you're still trying to bring that particular case to a certain kind of closure. But I don't think media follows it up in that sense. It is more of a sense to see, or to, like what Rajlakshmi was saying, it's to sensationalize the whole episode in some ways.
Yeah.
Look, this happened that many years ago, and they're still facing the brunt of it, but they're not tracking the case as such, and that in itself is a disservice to the whole system and to the survivor, definitely.
Yeah, I think there is this documentary on Netflix, Kill a Tiger, which is absolutely amazing because it shows you how to tell a story that is about the crime and not about the girl. They went after the father who was fighting for justice, how the system failed, how the police failed. They were the center of the story. The people who were failing on that girl. And the girl, hardly speak in the show. Well, let's move on. I was waiting to talk to you about who is writing these stories, who are writing the stories for women in the newsroom. But since you already spoke about it, I would like to hear how it's to be a male editor and work in stories for women. How do you deal with that in the newsroom?
See, mostly the newsroom is dominated by males, so obviously they are writing the stories. There are a few passionate males who are very particular about the stories. They take all kinds of precautions. They understand the gender sensitivity also. But there are also a kind of reporters who just don't care. So I think it's quite a mix up. But I still feel that we need more women reporter in the newsroom. We still feel the more women on the desk, so that they can understand the story with the sensitivity it needs to be dealt. Most of the time, these stories are not saying that deliberately these male reporters are taking a particular line because they have never been trained in that sense. There was a time in India when, 20 years back or 10 years back, when they were properly trained how to cover riots, how to cover the rape victims. But in the present context, I think that the consciousness is gone. There's nobody to tell them. In fact, they feel happy if they are taking any guidelines over there. In that context, I feel very strongly that however gender sensitive a male can be, but he will not be in a position to do justice with the story because he cannot think like a woman. Unless you think like a woman, unless you are sensitive enough to feel the pain of a woman, it will be difficult for you to express in a real sense. So that's why sometimes these stories are not taken with the seriousness that it should be taken seriously. It's a real accident sometimes because how the Nirbhaya story suddenly becomes so big. If I look back, are no answers. Why the story became so big? There are many, many stories other. With those stories never became big. People just forgotten. It is just confined to a small paragraph here and there, and nobody bothered about it. Maybe it is because this happened very close to this happened into the national capital region, or maybe at that point of time, something around happened 2011 and 12. The whole world was full of anxiety, and not only in India but every other place, the peoples are rising from the below. That was one reason. But like the story you mentioned about Connaught, that story could become a national story only when she tried to commit suicide in front of the chief minister's house. Just imagine the pain of a woman. And even in that case, in the Hathras case, the DGP of UP, he held a press conference and he said, no rape has happened because no semen was found there. The male semen was not found there. The idiot should know that the definition of rape is changed. And there's something that the finding a semen is not important in that sense. That it is not a certificate that the woman has been raped. But statement is enough. But the DGP, the topmost police officer of the state, which is comprised of 25 crore of the population, the biggest state in India in terms of population. And the DGP is shamelessly saying that no rape has happened. And imagine, before that, 10 days back, the district police has already lodged an FIR, mentioned rape in that sense, but 10 days later, the same DGP is saying something else. So, I think the police is also not very sensitized, the reporters are also not sensitized, and they don't understand the seriousness of the issue. So I still feel that if a woman is dealing with the story, if the woman editor is there who deals with these kind of stories, it can get a better expression, and it should get a better understanding of it. But still, I feel in the newsroom what is happening. The women reporters are basically tagged along with the beauty, the wellness, as you said, rightly said, very few feisty women reporters who could love to go to the field to report for the politics, and it is normally understood that the politics is consumed only by the male, by men, not by women.
If I could just add to that, there is a role of the institutions that are creating these journalists to come out. Where is the courses for building an understanding on, it's not just on women, on gender issues, but also other issues that are very central to our country. So it's missing in a lot of the curriculum that is taught. It's also missing in the trainings that the police might have, the judges might have. If a judge can turn around and say, would you be okay if you marry your rapist, how do you even deal with that? How does one ask that question? I understand that there are economic thinking behind all of those questions, but you're in a way pushing the victim to actually marry your rapist, your own rapist. So in that sense, I don't think the exposure, the understanding of what it is present in a lot of the institutions that are meant to train and educate, sensitize journalists or reporters or other media houses. So in that sense, I think one of the biggest solutions, I know we will be talking about it, is to try and integrate such courses in courses from educational institutions from the very beginning, and also stepping back, bring it into the curriculum that every child is exposed to in the country. I think that attempt has begun, but is it enough? I don't think so. There was one more point that
What I want to add to that is, very recently the High Court judge has given a verdict, I think observation of the verdict on this confusing issues, where he said the unnatural sex with a wife without the consent of the husband is not a penal offence, it's not a rape. So just, Chhattisgarh High, just imagine. How will you define this? The unnatural sex husband is allowed to indulge into unnatural sex with a wife without her consent, and it's not a penal offense. The husband cannot be punished. So it's a different word altogether.
Marital rape is not a crime.
Is not a crime. What I also wanted to highlight here was the fact that in the current situation, maybe both of you might be able to shed more light, women, reporters, journalists face a lot more violence, threats of violence, both physical as well as in online spaces. So unless there is that sense of, I am backed by my organization, my media house, and my safety is taken care of, I'm putting myself at the risk to report. So I don't know, is there a role for media houses to talk about these issues? Yes, there is a role to talk about these issues, to talk about how do they deal with violence or threat of violence that their own employees are facing on a day-to-day basis.
And this issue was not at all discussed into the media. Just about the Chhattisgarh High Court judge's observation, just confined to a small portion somewhere in the newspaper, which needs to be discussed. Which needs to be discussed right there, because basically newsroom is led by men.
No, more so because she said so in her dying declaration to a magistrate that her husband had forced himself on her and had committed unnatural sex and because of which she died, because of the injuries. She died because of the injuries. So in spite of that, the judge said no, because Section 377 has been abrogated. It means that this is permitted, but it's not the case, because Section 377 does not decriminalize sex which is not, of same sex or unnatural sex, or whatever you might call it, without consent. If it's without consent, it is still criminalized. So that section still stays. It's not been. It was just read down to decriminalize consensual sex between two individuals of the same sex, but it does not decriminalize. If it's not consensual. So the interpretation was I think completely wrong. But then the media did not pick it up. They didn't. There's of course one women's organization, the All India Democratic Women's Association. They issued a very strong statement on this. But the statement itself wasn't carried, Ashutosh. I know, because I'm part of the media list. Nobody carried it.
Forget about that. 2 days back, what the Supreme Court has observed, that you can call Mia, Tia and anybody. Just imagine. So, I think we're living in a different world altogether. When the High Court judges, Supreme Court judges are allowed to pass these kind of statements and observations and can get free. Nobody will say anything. And these things will not be discussed. Maybe 10 years back, 15 years back, this issue would have been discussed threadbare, and the judge would have been asked to take back the words.
This desensitization is happening at all levels, right? It's happening at the level of the judiciary, and of course, the media just reflects those things. It's not an island. The media doesn't exist in an island, right? So it's a reflection of all these biases, which they also reflect, and they finally sort of use them in there. So all that, since Julie was speaking about, why isn't it discussed in institutions, where they learn journalism? I'm sure what they're taught today in those institutions are how to make India great again.
I was also going to say that it is a reflection, because there is this growing backlash for women's rights, growing assertion of threat to men's rights, and that there is women are implicating men by false accusations of harassment, dowry demands. So the save the men, the Indian family is a big movement of sorts out there. I think it's called the manosphere, where you do have a lot of these organizations who are talking about the erosion of men's rights, and so therefore the need to talk about it and defend the rights of men. again, it's just a reflection of what's existing in the society.
Well, Raja Lakshmi mentioned something about the market at the beginning. You also about like how the newsroom full of men, and now you say also something about how talented is for us as a woman to go to the field to work, because safety issue and what media can do about that, and also, which is a reality, how challenging is the situation for media to survive. Media who is also fighting for a market, because at the end of the day, the media needs to survive and it relies on the audience, and I guess it's gonna, yeah.
No, it's not so tough, you know, because I think the media has a social obligation. It has a social role. It can't be. It's not another industry. It's not another corporate entity. You know, it has a certain social responsibility. That is why it's called the fourth estate. It's not. I mean, there's a certain thing to weight to it, but it has completely abrogated its responsibility because because some people want to make more money. It's not that everybody makes the same money.
No, it's not even.
Even in the same organization.
Probably not even
I
about
understand that
survival.
sustenance is important sometimes,
Yeah.
but again, you can't sell news like you sell soaps. So the difference has to be made. It's not like selling news or marketing news is not like selling soaps. It's not like selling your shoes. It's not like selling your beauty products. So the difference has to be made. It cannot just only be the profit motive, because what a reporter is saying, what an anchor is saying, what an editor is saying, or writing whatever, it has an impact on the larger society. If you start writing what the market is doing, then you make the pornography free because everybody loves it. Everybody wants to watch it. But can you do that? You can't do that. So the market cannot be the only force in terms of news business. So this business is not the business as business is perceived by businessmen. But unfortunately or fortunately, whatever you say, there are the newspaper owners who only want to sell and make profit. Whatever is reflected in the books is important for them. They forget about it. And that's why so much deterioration has come over it in the last few years.
But I think it still put pressure on the media who still want to do the right thing to get the stories right, because it's the same market. The same market where owners want to sell the stories at the mainstream stories. And I was also saying like how many changes need to be done about security, about hiring more women in the newsroom. But that was my final question for you. What can be done? More women in the newsroom will make a change. Like, is it enough to make a change?
It will. I think democratize those spaces definitely. But I do not believe that just by having sort of women in certain certain leadership positions, automatically translates into them being more sensitive towards
gender or women issues. They can well incorporate those very patriarchal feudal norms of behavior and and behave just like that, because a career is your main goal and you are just a careerist. Then you're and if you put back the role that the media is supposed to play, a socially responsible role, then you're just reduced to being any other person on that seat. So there's so I do not think that it can just be sort of limited by having more women there, because ultimately if they are all going to do the same thing as the rest of the men, this is not going to make any difference, isn't it? So but I do not see that there has to be an artificial kind of a wall between the male and the female co-workers. I mean, I think they should be both equally sensitized for a better society, because after all, men are not our enemies. We need them in this social goal, in this progressive objectives, for a just and an equal society and for social transformation. Ultimately there has to be some some other goal, other than self let's say aggrandizement or promotion or whatever.
Yeah. So what about you? What can be done?
What can be done?
Yeah.
More women in the newsroom.
Do you think that would be
See,
enough?
I can tell you from my experience, the sheer presence of a woman reporter in a bureau has a very restraining impact on male reporters. It is very disciplining. if there is no women reporter in the meeting, the ambience of the meeting is entirely different and the woman is present there, has an impact. So, but more women has to come out, more women has, and they have to also be very clear in their mind what they want to do. Because if you are only confining yourself to the fashion, wellness, beauty, all those, then I think that defeats the whole purpose. There are brilliant reporters who are doing some brilliant reporting in politics, brilliant reporting in crime. More of such reporters are needed, not only in the newsroom and on the TV screen and everywhere. It has an impact. There's no other alternative. But the other side is that makes a man very insecure because they think their space is shrinking on a daily basis. Because the literacy rate among the women is jumping like anything. So that has made men very, very insecure. And one of the reasons for the rise of the right is also this, because the right always talks about the male, and the chauvinism. And because the male in the last 50, 60 years, in every sphere of employment, they are making their presence and their numbers is increasing. So if the number is increasing, obviously in the same proportion, the men are also losing jobs. So if the more men are unemployed, it is also because of the women, because they are getting into the job. But still I feel we need more aggressive women reporter in the newsroom and on the desk also, who can stand up and say, this is not acceptable, this cannot go like this.
But it might take some time because women in the workforce,
I think it can be done. You know, if there's a progressive, let's say like a progressive outlook, not exactly outlook in a government, which is a forward-looking government, which provides. I mean, I don't know how is it in Spain, or maybe it's there in Venezuela. I'm sure, where the state provides for child care, where the state provides for social security, where the state provides for your old age, old age pensions. Now, how will women come out into that employment space if they're spending most of the time on domestic chores? There's a recent survey that has come out, a time use survey. It shows that that women spend around some 7-8 hours of the day on on domestic chores as compared to 3 or 4 hours, or even I think much less as compared to men, right? So therefore that's in fact given as a reason for the low economic participation of women in the labor force. Okay, so how will women come to the labor force if you do not make those provisions where child care is taken care of, where social security once you are not of employable age, you need some old age social security. That's not there in the media here today. I mean, it's not there in fact for most of the informal sector. But so I think a sensitive state, a sensitive government, a progressive, government with a progressive outlook, okay, with maybe a left of center outlook, can ensure that. Not a right-wing government, which would rather have women spend more time in their homes and not come into the economic sphere. So it's not going to happen. And of course, the media women too. I think women in the media also face these challenges.
Yes.
They have this double burden of work, right?
We are part of the same economy, right? And
Yeah.
the same world, like we are exposed to the same race, the same,
Absolutely. Yeah. I have friends, who have opted out of reporting because of multitasking. They said that we can't multitask.
yes.
And they've given up work after having children because they have to keep a private nanny, because there isn't affordable or free childcare services or safe childcare services where they can sort of leave their children and join back on work. Several, in fact, women professionals do not start families, for the fear that they might lose out on that opportunity.
Yeah.
So you don't have security of employment, okay, of your position. So then you make those compromises and you go back to doing something that you do not like, essentially.
Yeah.
So that's how.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the number of women in the workforce dropped dramatically when they get the age of getting married.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you have a lot to say.
Yeah, there are certain things which the sector as a whole can do, and there are other things that work as enabling factors. One is what Rajlakshmi was talking about, the role of the state. And for the immediate role of the sector, I think a playbook like this is required, and I think each media outlet could also develop their own and try and see. It's, again, you don't have to reinvent the wheel because a lot of it is out there available. It's not just, but it's a matter of taking the time out and adapting it to your requirements. So one is that there are certain things that you can commit to on a daily basis to make sure that representation of women as reporters, as sources, as experts, as people who have solutions are visible. You can track them on a daily basis. I think this is what I've read. One will have to look more into the evidence, but you have good practices like this across the world. One can actually see and adapt. I understand that there are greater challenges of economic survival, sustenance, but it's still doable. One of the biggest things that I feel one can do is to say no to manners, make sure that you have diversity in representation just on any show that you're having. Also to try and build that understanding of what's the backstory in a way. If there are just so many women in a sector, why is that happening? Pretty much the way Rajlakshmi was talking about, that if you don't have childcare, don't expect the workforce participation to be really high because there is nothing that's backing them up. So have that backstory, have those nuances to be built into your reportage. I think that's one way of doing it. Reach out to those who have, like, women's rights organizations have all the ideas but no spaces to push them. So maybe have them as allies, and there are examples of that as well. And of course, I think educational system, if they can bring in those aspects right from the very beginning, and one can decide what is the state can do and what limited institutions can do, like institutions that are catered towards journalism or towards media, communications, whatever. It's doable. You could have courses. I mean, I was looking up, and the data is that in India you have about 300 colleges that talk about mass communication, but less than 10% offer courses on gender. So how can you bring that percentage of 10, less than 10 to almost 100? Those are ways in which one can, but it has to be, it has to be systemic. Thank you for somebody from the audience saying it. It has to be systemic, it has to be consistent, it has to be at a much faster pace than right now.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to have time for questions and answers. If there is any.
Hi, I would like to know your opinion about, like, when you explain about the media, what kind of news they publish in the day-to-day basis, and you said it's about the person who consumes the news and the interest of the news channel newspapers. So do you think it's the media house or is the government also, because there are so many issues that we have? For example, if you talk about gender pay gap or the rape cases we are talking about, because every day you can see those news, the atrocity against the women from marginalized section, or if you talk about child marriage, for example, where 3 children get married every minute in India, as for the NCRB reports. So is it the media house or the pressure from the government? Because sometimes the government doesn't want to disclose the problem that we are facing right now. Because I was working in a project which was about human trafficking, but the government didn't want to publish it as a national report because they wanted to specify, saying that it has to be the certain district when it is research, when you can generalize later. So it's the media house or the government which decide what should come to the front?
Ideally, the media house should be deciding, but such has come where we are living in a time where sometimes the government also decides, and sometimes we are also self-censoring. But gone are the days when we were free, the media was free.
Yeah, I think what Ashutosh says is right. You know, the media should be the ultimate arbiter of what news should be picked up and what should go. And for something as sort of important as human trafficking, okay, which has a certain social significance, I mean, I don't see any reason why it should be blacked out. But yes, you know, because the kind of times that we are living in, and there's a certain narrative where you have to show that everything is fine, you know, and that there's nothing wrong. You have to make India great again, mega, right? So, so all kinds of negative stories, you know, are sort of a complete no-no. And I think there is a certain understanding, perhaps, you know, I do not know for sure, but sometimes I do feel that, you know, media organizations do have a certain understanding with the government, because a lot of your revenues come from the government, you know, in the form of government ads. So why would somebody sort of compromise so much, you know, so as to lose out on that, you know, that revenue by sort of putting stories that are of public importance? But it's sad. I mean, it's sad because, you know, there are certain extremely narrow interests that are dictating the content in the media today. So self-censorship is there, absolutely is there, and because of revenues.
Well, thank you very much for being here. It's been a tremendous pleasure.
Thank you, Leah.
Nosotros tenemos ahora el presidente de la agencia EFE. Sorry. No, he's gonna close the table.
Okay. Thank you very much, you all, for coming this evening. Thank you for sure, you all the panelists, for this very, very interesting conversation. I think all of us, we share these topics all over the world. It doesn't matter if we are in Spain or in India or in the States or in America, Latin America, which is a special in our heart place for us, panelists. I think we are talking about an old issue, an old topic, the equality between men and women, and the struggle to keep on fighting to achieve what we want both women and men to do with our society in this path, the equality one. Let me tell you that I think this kind of tragedies or misunderstandings, the violence and things like that, we are not here as Spanish people presenting our book, Is This Man, you know, this book exists to give anybody any lesson, but for sure to hear you and to share your experiences, because we both share our lives. And also to say that only Indian people are certain amount of people in the world. If the dates about population in India are right, you are 1,400 people, and if the 50% of the population is women, you are 700, more than all the European population, more than all the Spanish-speaking world, almost the same population in Africa. So I was reminding I think it was Archimedes, the philosopher, the Greek philosopher, who said something like, if I have a point to support and push, I can move the world, I can move the earth. If you, women of India, step forward in your fight, in your struggle, I am sure the world is stepping forward with you. So let's go up and fight, because we, the world, we have a lot of hopes. We are expecting your movement. You are important for the humanity, for human being, for all of us, women and men, but moreover, above all, for women. Let me tell you something in Spanish, because I feel something strange if I'm here in the Instituto Cervantes and don't speak Spanish. Someone can wonder, what are you playing with? We're talking in English, yes? Because we are here, as we have been before in Rabat or in Pekin or in Sao Paulo, doing the same thing. We are presenting this book that is the base of our conversation, because including in these pages, we have, as Javier told us, a lot of kind of rules about how to treat this issue, this topic in our newsroom. Let me tell you in Spanish, and I trust on the translator services. ¿No? Please. Efectivamente, entre sus páginas, cuando tenemos un punto concreto que habla del enfoque de género, tal y como explicó Javier Lascurain, el coordinador de este nuevo libro de estilo urgente, pues hablamos de retratar la diversidad de las funciones que cumplen hombres y mujeres en la sociedad, diversificar las fuentes a las que se consulta. Hay muchas más cosas, pero yo creo que esto de diversificar las fuentes es muy importante, porque ¿cuántas veces hemos visto una opinión, una posición política, una decisión representada a través de la voz de un hombre? Y cómo lo que tenemos que hacer es reconocer que hay una gran variedad de voces, entre otras las voces de mujeres muy preparadas, que tienen que guiar, tienen que liderar también la opinión, la propuesta política, el avance económico de nuestro mundo, en España y en cualquier otro lugar, también aquí en India. Decía que no estamos para dar lecciones porque no hace tanto tiempo que en España vivíamos y vivimos todavía hoy una situación de gran desafío en el camino de la igualdad. Particularmente yo mismo fui criado en el entorno de una familia con una raíz machista, pero no siento que yo fuera víctima de una situación concreta que me tocó a mí. Era de alguna manera la generalidad de mi generación. Yo soy lo que llaman un baby boomer en España, nací en 1963, y muchos de mi generación saben de qué estamos hablando. Los hombres llegaban de trabajar, las mujeres se quedaban en casa con la crianza. Y las mujeres tenían que hacer todo lo posible por satisfacer al hombre, al padre de la familia, al líder de la familia. Incluso ponerle las zapatillas, tenerle caliente la comida, prepararle la bebida, tener la cama arreglada, la ropa limpia. Todo eso lo he visto yo, no es un libro de historia, eso es mi historia, es la historia de muchos que podemos tener esta edad. Creo que ha habido años de gran avance, mucha importancia en la lucha por la igualdad, que creo que esencialmente eso es el feminismo, y sin embargo el miedo que muchos tenemos es que estemos en años de retroceso, en años en los que de nuevo volvamos hacia atrás. Y hay una ola a nivel mundial que está empujando en el sentido contrario al del avance en los derechos de hombres y mujeres, en el avance de la igualdad. Esta es ahora mismo una amenaza a la que tenemos que hacer frente. EFE, a través de su libro de estilo, a través de su proceder diario, se incorpora ya desde hace mucho tiempo al camino de la igualdad, pero tiene mucho recorrido todavía por hacer. Nosotros en nuestra redacción podemos decir que somos una agencia de prensa en el que prácticamente el 50% son hombres o mujeres. Todavía falta una parte por llegar, pero al igual que ocurre en muchas redacciones en España, la incorporación de la mujer ha sido masiva en los últimos años. hay muchas mujeres haciendo periodismo. Sin embargo, no hay tantas mujeres dirigiendo las redacciones, no hay tantas mujeres dirigiendo las empresas, no hay tantas mujeres al frente de los consejos de administración, no solamente de las empresas periodísticas, sino de tantas otras. Ese es el techo de cristal que tan habitualmente se menciona y que todavía sigue existiendo. Y sigue teniendo los problemas que compartimos aquí y allá, los de siempre, los problemas por los que la mujer es empujada por la sociedad a dar un paso atrás y a pensar de sí misma que tiene menos competencias, menos capacidades para ejercer su manera de ver el mundo en el periodismo como en tantos otros sitios. Quizá la crianza a la que hemos hecho referencia, el cuidado, el propio papel diferente que la mujer siempre ha tenido con respecto a una visión más humana de nuestra sociedad, hace que se convierta en un peso en contra y no en algo favorable. Yo creo que tiene que invertirse los papeles y eso debería aún mejorar la situación y el papel de la mujer en nuestra sociedad. Por eso reitero que nosotros no tenemos que dar lecciones a nadie, tenemos que compartir nuestros problemas. España desde hace más de 20 años facilita constantemente datos acerca de la violencia ejercida contra la mujer, por ejemplo los datos sobre asesinatos machistas. Hay otros países de Europa, un espacio que compartimos, que no ofrecen ningún dato acerca de esto, no sabemos realmente cuántas mujeres mueren a manos de sus parejas en Italia o en Alemania o en Suecia, países que supuestamente tienen un gran liderazgo social. En España ha sido, yo creo, un ejemplo en las últimas décadas de esta política de transparencia, y a esa política de transparencia también se debe, y lo reitero, la agencia EFE. Acabamos de inscribir un plan de igualdad, lo cual también define, por otra parte, nuestros defectos. Deberíamos tenerlo hace mucho tiempo. Y todavía estamos en el principio de un camino en el que no hemos llegado todavía, y ustedes sí. Antes mencionaban a Indira Gandhi, porque inspiró a la madre de Indira, nuestra responsable de la oficina aquí en Nueva Delhi. Nosotros todavía estamos por tener una primera ministra. En España no hemos tenido nunca una presidenta del gobierno, una primera ministra. En España tenemos muchas cosas todavía que hacer y muchas cosas que aprender también de ustedes, la gente de la India. Por eso reitero el comentario inicial. Creo que si la India se mueve, si la mujer de su país se mueve, el mundo se va a mover, y es, creo, la fuerza que hemos venido nosotros hoy a recoger y a compartir con ustedes, y de nuevo agradecerles la maravillosa mesa que han protagonizado. A ustedes también, si me permiten, el agradecimiento al Instituto Cervantes por alojar esta cita, que es la última de este ciclo de presentaciones de nuestro libro de estilo urgente de EFE, a quienes han asistido a esta mesa, y también a nuestra querida Indira, que has demostrado tus dotes como coordinadora y presentadora de cualquier tipo de debate. Gracias, Indira, y gracias de nuevo por su participación. Un abrazo y gracias.